Now, several of our military branches are facing big recruitment challenges. The Air Force missed its recruitment goal this year for the first time since 1999. The Army has fallen short of that goal by nearly a decade and is now down to 425,000 soldiers, the smallest full-time force since 1940. The Navy also fell short by 13,000 recruits this year, and that's despite upping the enlistment bonus and lowering some testing scores that are required to join. These are just some examples of a growing crisis. To dig into why recruitment is posing such a challenge for our armed forces, we're bringing in licensed professional counselor Corey Weathers. Corey is a military family and culture expert. Thank you so much for being here. In your book, Military Culture Shift, it unpacks the impact of war, money, and generational perspective on, you wrote, morale, retention, and leadership. So the first question for you is, why are we seeing record low confidence in our military?
Thank you, Lauren, for having me. Our country in general, all the generations are struggling with trust in institutions. That's not just the government. It's not just the military. It's also banks, educational systems, religious institutions. And so institutional trust as a whole is declining. And we're seeing that definitely for the military as well. And so that is affecting recruitment. It's also affecting retention as well. So as you said, we are struggling a lot across all branches. I think Marines are the only ones that are maybe reaching their goals. Part of this is due to American disconnect. We have fewer Americans than ever that know somebody that's serving. There's also some DoD issues, and there's also a very tired cohort that just endured 2 decades of war, that some of them are actually discouraging their Gen Z kids from joining.
That's really interesting, because with talking about Gen Z and that generation, there seems to be this level of discontentment within the military that has actually gone viral in many instances. We wanted to show a clip that was off of TikTok where members of the Army specifically share why they joined. Let's watch.
You're gonna go up to random people asking them why they joined the Army. Why'd you join the Army? Camaros. Why'd you join the Army?
I hate myself.
Why'd you join the Army?
I don't know.
Frost, why'd you join the Army?
I hate my life.
There might be some comedic stuff playing into this, and obviously there are favorable stories too. It's interesting that you mentioned the Marines kind of being a side factor here, because I find that Marine-related videos tend to be more positive. But regardless, that clip got millions of views. Word-of-mouth messaging within the military doesn't seem to be great. So is this part of the recruitment problem, the fact that Gen Z is on TikTok seeing things like this?
Yeah, our whole society has changed and everything is online. In some ways, we can see what's behind the curtain, right? And so that's one of the things that we're working on within the DoD side. How do we improve morale? How do we address some of the issues that we're seeing in housing, some of the issues that families are having? And those definitely need to be addressed. But when we see Gen Z is craving and asking all institutions, all businesses, both civilian and on the military side, for authenticity, it's really just about telling the truth and really speaking about building relationships in your business or even within the DoD system. That's definitely something that we're wanting to work on. And yes, we're seeing more than ever soldiers, family members, not only online sharing what's really going on and their true feelings, but they're also going to Congress and talking about it as well.
Raising that issue up. About a year ago, I reported on how the military has tried to combat this issue. It kind of touched on it at the beginning of the segment, but it has used cash bonuses, to the tune of $35,000 in some cases. Started up training camps for recruits to set them up for success, to pass, fitness eligibility requirements. Those were not always being met. Since we're having this conversation now, are those changes not really working? What do you think is going on with that?
Yeah, I think that anytime you see recruitment strategies changing, just know that we've been doing this since 1973, as far as the military finding these really creative and new ways to reach the next generation. So you're going to see bonuses. You may see them go up. You may see them go down. It's also about recruiting families. And going back to what you just asked a minute ago, when we're seeing what it's like to serve on the inside, it's really important that we deliver the right message of what the military actually has to offer. We do a great job taking care of families, but there's definitely some things that we need to work on as well. So yes, I think some of these bonuses are going to work, but I honestly, and what I write about a military culture shift in the book, is we really have to work on the cohort, the culture that just went through that 2 decades of war. That's a lot of millennials, but especially Gen X, who are burned out and they're exhausted and they're wondering if they can go through another global conflict. So I think we're really going to have to invest in pouring into them and healing that cohort to really, I think, turn the recruitment crisis around.
I see, because that's really interesting, because you'll hear folks who are saying we got to focus on the youth, the next generation, and you're saying we got to fix, the issues that came up as a result of what we saw play out in the 2000s to address then the next generation coming in. One other thing I wanted to ask you about was last year, less than a quarter of 17 to 24-year-olds, so again, focusing on that younger generation, met enlistment requirements for a number of reasons. There were issues regarding obesity, issues regarding drugs. Another factor was DOD restricted anyone with a history of taking ADHD medication. How much can the DOD amend eligibility benchmarks without it harming national security, especially on that front of ADHD medication? Is that too high of a mark?
Yeah, I think this is a big conversation that's happening about whether or not the DOD is being too relaxed on those standards. There's a whole bunch of variables at play here. We do see a lot of Gen Z, 60% they're saying of Gen Z have mental health diagnoses going on. And as a mental health clinician, I would say there's a lot of diagnoses that where you're getting anxiety and depression diagnosis that may not be an accurate diagnosis. It's really more about life stressors. So we're trying to really pull these apart. Which are actual diagnoses that would interfere with service? And which of these are life stressors, such as going through grief and bereavement, and not necessarily an anxiety and depression diagnosis that's chronic that could interfere with service? So it's a big question, a big conversation that we're having. It does look like we were relaxing standards here and there, but honestly, I think that we're doing the best that we can to really bring people in. I have a Gen Z 19-year-old that's waiting to come into the Air Force, that's waiting on a waiver himself, and sometimes it's just getting through all of those blocks to get in. But you're right, it's definitely a big conversation and one we need to keep having.
And the last question that I wanted to bring up to you was this aspect and angle around women who serve in the military. There have been several cases, of course, we think of Vanessa Guillen as an example, of situations where women aren't necessarily protected. They're raising up issues within this institution and finding that they're having a very challenging time. And I really shouldn't limit it to women, just service members in general. But do you think that that is an issue that needs to be addressed, not only because it's an issue, but for the sake of being able to help recruit other people, women, into the military, that aspect, that cultural aspect?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know for a fact that the DOD has got some great programs on sexual harassment. There's a great system in place for reporting sexual harassment. There's a lot of work to be done on everything from how the system of reporting and investigation plays out. We are currently stationed at Fort Cavazos now, formerly Fort Hood, where Vanessa Guillen, all of that has happened. And so there's a lot of overhaul that's being done on that. But when we are seeing so many of these headlines play out over social media and on the news, it can be really discouraging to think that maybe the military is not making those advancements. I think that they definitely are. And at the same time, I want to say there's definitely a lot of work to be done. And there's a lot of female and as you said, there's a lot of service member victims that we still need to listen to. And we need a lot of providers in the civilian, outside the gates, civilian providers, to be able to come alongside and support those that need that extra care. We are short on providers across the board. And it's a great way for people to get involved, especially as we're coming up on Veterans Day. Ways for you to reconnect and support and come alongside, because the DOD can't possibly do everything perfectly for the over 2 million families that we have. So we can definitely use a lot of help.
Corey Leathers, author, professional counselor, and military culture expert, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Really important conversation that we just had right now, so I appreciate it.